So I sensed a theme with the questions I was getting when people were becoming interested in this. So I compiled the 5 most asked questions that I get, like I said, about being a private jet cabin attendant in the aviation industry. Just a quick overview of what we're going to do. So I will also answer, what is the job that we do, which is probably the hardest question, yet the most asked one. What does a schedule look like for what we do? How the heck do you get into private aviation and get your foot in the door? Do you need a commercial background? That is one I get all the time. And then what are the pay and salary expectations for the different areas of this career? So rather than hitting a bunch of bullet points about me, I thought a few pictures might do me a little more justice. So I grew up in Northeast Ohio, right down the street from the Football Hall of Fame. And from day one, I was destined to work in sports. I wanted to be a Samantha Ponder sideline reporter, and that was always what I was going to do. My dad was a basketball coach, and Friday Night Lights, if you've ever seen it, that was Canton. So I went to the University of Vermont for a little bit, and then I transferred to Ohio State, where I studied sport industry and worked in the athletic communications department. It was fabulous, and I look upon it fondly. And after that, I ended up getting my master's from the University of Cincinnati in sport administration as well. By that point, I was absolutely fried. I was drained on sports, and I sort of hit this inflection point where I was about to get kicked off my parents' insurance, and I needed to figure something out quick. So I did what every other 25-year-old did and went to Starbucks. I knew I could get great benefits. I could get 40 hours until I sort of figured out what I wanted to do. But what was supposed to be something temporary actually ended up turning into a few years of a job where I started as a supervisor, worked my way up to manager. And within that, again, I hit a point during COVID. Everybody has a COVID story, and this is mine. So I was sitting at home one day, and I had to be quarantined because one of my employees was sick. And sitting around scrolling as we do, I came across a friend's, I think it was her Instagram profile, and saw that she was doing this job. And I thought, man, that looks okay. Like, that looks like something I could do. So I did a little bit more research, and I ended up at training 3 weeks later in December of 2020. And my world changed. I turned into a networking machine. I mean, I was relentless in that because I got really sick of calling my mom every day crying at Starbucks because of how unhappy I was. I needed to do something different that would fulfill me in some kind of way. So while working full time, I started networking, and I connected with somebody who was also an Ohio State alum. That led me to my very first contract flight. And shortly after that, I'd connected with somebody else who was the director of operations at Wheels Up. And it was perfect timing. They were getting ready to hire cabin attendants for a larger fleet. And I had served him coffee at Starbucks, unbeknownst to me. So that started my career. I worked at a full-time charter operator for a year, and then was hired onto the account that I currently work on now. This job has opened up an endless amount of doors, and it's given me this platform that we're on right now to speak to all of you and hopefully inspire you to, just go for it, because that's what I did. So the first question I get, what is the job of a cabin attendant? Like I said, it's the most asked question, but the hardest to answer. And sometimes, and I know many of you on here who already do this job, you'll say, other than flying the plane, there's not a lot that we don't do. Depending on what company you work for, what account you work on, and everything in between, there's a very, very wide range of duties and expectations for what we do. First and foremost, doesn't matter where you are at and where you work, safety is absolutely number one, not only for yourselves, but for your guests and crew alike. We work in a very service-based job, and hospitality is the second focus behind safety. In a luxury environment, we got guests from A to B, but what's the experience that we give them in the meantime? Duties and responsibilities, like I said, they vary across the board. And I have on here 135 versus 91, and I'll get more into the lingo, but I mean, the possibilities are endless for what we do. Here's a list of some of the things that we will do. Like I said, safety. It's knowing first aid, being prepared in emergency situations. It's knowing where your emergency equipment is and also how to use it. That's huge. That's, we go to training once a year for our recurrent, and that's something that we go over nonstop while we're there, because at the end of the day, that's what matters. We source catering for guests, for ourselves, and for crew. Sometimes we cook on board. Some have microwaves, ovens. I've seen stovetops. I'm trying to get a little air fryer on my plane. So, there is some really fantastic things that you can do as far as cooking goes. You're also being hospitable and creating a comfortable and luxurious guest experience. There's a book that I've talked to many of you about and that I just lent to a friend. It's called Unreasonable Hospitality. And if you get a chance to get your hands on that book, I recommend it because it is so, so great. It really reignites that fire for what it is that we do. We are also liaisons from the guests to the crew, from the guests to the management company, whoever we're working with, scheduling, dispatch. We as cabin attendants have the most customer and guest facing role. So we're the one who often is that go-to person. We're personal shoppers. Anything from USA Today to a very particular wine to a specific donut from a shop in a very small city, you name it, we make it happen. We also do a lot of cleaning and organizing. In fact, it's one of my more favorite things to do on board is organizing. I can't tell you how many times I've touched my galley and moved things around just based on the day. And that's just to name a few. Any cabin attendant will tell you that our capabilities extend far beyond the cabin. I have some skills listed that also make great cabin attendants. Discretion is huge. We have to be discreet. We are privy to a lot of important information, and it is so crucial to be very, very discreet with the responsibilities that we have. You have to be vigilant. You have to be eyes wide open all the time, ready for any scenario, any situation, thinking 10 steps ahead. You have to keep your composure. Something that they told us at flight safety that stuck with me is that we are like the swans. We are calm and beautiful and making it all happen above the water, but under the scenes, our feet are kind of going like this, just doing whatever we can to make it happen. We need to be perceptive. We need to be able to read the room. We need to be able to understand the guests' unspoken needs before they even realize that it's necessary. And we need to be adaptable. Schedules change. Catering changes, times change. The only constant other than safety is change in what we do. So you need to be okay with that. You need to have thick skin as far as that resilience goes too. It's not personal, it's business. And to be detail oriented. When you get a trip sheet, you need to know that like the back of your hand. You need to acknowledge every little detail of every bit of what you're doing, the cabin, the galley, your catering. It's so important to notice the finite details. And you need to be relentless. This is a very volatile industry. You need to be in constant pursuit of not only excellence in what you do, but also in finding a job. You can't get comfortable. Never get too comfortable, never get too complacent. Always be relentless. What does a potential schedule look like? This is a tough question to answer, but I'm going to do the best I can and break it down a little bit for you. So schedules do vary, but there are options to consider based on what type of career, what kind of life, and what kind of routine you're ultimately looking for. And that's going to change. You can have everything from a very set schedule, knowing exactly when you're going to be off, to 24/7, 365 on call. So you really need to get honest with yourself about what you actually want and what you are willing to work with. If you are somebody that doesn't like to be gone for 3 weeks at a time, a schedule that requires you to be on for 21 days at a time is probably not for you. And that's okay. And like I said, just like job duties, there is a range and a standard, but there is no absolute. So I broke it down here a little bit between the different types of operations you can work within. These are the most common. I don't know that these are the only. But this is the easiest way to sort of explain it to you. So on one end, you have the charter operator or fractional. So that's going to be a Part 135 or a Part 91K. These typically have set schedules and what they call rotations. So when I worked for a 135, I was 8 days on and I was 6 days off. So those 8 days I was theirs, and on the 6 days that I was off, turned my phone off, click, and that time was mine and whatever I wanted to do with that. This is really great for people who are looking for structure, who like the predictability of their schedule. They want to be able to plan something, and they're looking for those hard days off. Hard days off mean, like I said, you can click your phone off. Often with this too, you have the most standard of the duties. They're not going to deviate too much from that normal cabin attendant duties. In the middle, you have a private owner, and that is called a Part 91. Within that, you can also have a little bit of 135. So the best way to explain this is that in my account, for example, I work for one owner on one jet with the same crew. However, every once in a while, we will charter that out. When we charter that out, it's considered 135. It is available for somebody else to charter out, use. You can be a 91 and a 135. So no two 91s are the same. With some you're considered on, like I said, 24/7. Others, it's sort of implied. And sometimes you do have a set schedule. It's not very often, but it can happen. So in my experience, my schedule varies. I don't get too many pop-up trips, but I do get some things thrown on every once in a while that weren't expected. Nothing that's over the top, unmanageable. Some 91 accounts have more than one. Accounts that do more flying than normal tend to have more than 2 pilots or more than 1 cabin attendant. And like I said, there's not really set schedules. Independent contractors are on the other end. So you are an independent contractor and you accept work on a trip-by-trip basis. People really like this option if they have another career path that they are doing, or they want to feel like they have a little bit more freedom and control over their schedules. With this, you always have your bags packed. You never know when a trip could come up. And I mean, I woke up one day, I was brushing my teeth and I got called for a trip. And I said, "Can you be at the airport in an hour?" I said, "Of course." And that's how it goes. People like this love the spontaneity of this job. If you say no too often, though, you won't get called. That's the kick to this one. There's that freedom, but there's also a little bit of constraint with it, because you do need to say yes if you want to get called back for work. All right, so how do you get into private aviation? That is the million-dollar question. I think that if you talk to cabin attendants who are in this or who have been in this for a while, no two paths are identical, but I do believe that there is a generalized roadmap. I think when you have a game plan and that roadmap, it takes a lot of the unknown and a lot of the scary out of it, because there's some sort of direction. There's some sort of goal that you're working to each step of the way. Because what I find happens is that cabin attendants get into, they send themselves to training and they are jazzed up and ready to go. But then they say, "Oh no, now what?" Because they didn't have a plan and they don't have people in their corner to talk to, mentors, other leaders in this industry. It is so imperative to find guidance from those who are also established within the industry. They're going to tell you what to do and what worked for them, because they are successful as well. The CFA connection is an incredible resource, and something that they say all the time is community over competition. And what that means is there is enough room at the top for every single one of us. So lean on your community, lean on those who have been there. You won't regret it. It's so important. And I will go in a few steps. Next slide. So here's the best general way to get into private aviation. Step 1 is do your research. And I have understand Instagram versus reality on here for a very, very important reason. Instagram is amazing. I have met many of you from it. Social media, it absolutely has a place. But I do think with what we do and the way our careers go is that it just scratches the surface. It's very highlight reel, and it doesn't always get to the meat of the importance of what we do. It's so much deeper than going to the beach for a couple of days. It's so much deeper than flying on private jets. It's the feeling that you get when you hold yourself to the highest standard. It's the feeling that you get after you complete a mission with your crew and you've got your guests where they needed to be and they're beaming and they're happy and they're raving over the experience that they had with you. That's the reality of it. And that's what matters and that's what's important. And, like I said, it's just, I don't think that gets portrayed. And I don't know that it can be. I don't know that that's something that I would ever be able to demonstrate in a photo or a reel or anything like that. So do some research. As far as training goes, what training do I need? Where do I go? And what kind of investment am I looking at? I think people are often shocked at the price and what the investment cost and the investment time is, but you need to understand what that looks like so you're not getting thrown any curveballs. I think for what we do, the investment is so incredibly worth it. Not just for the money that there is to be made, because, call it what it is. There is money to be made in this industry, but it's so worth it. It's so worth it once you get over that hump and you're flying. You're like, that was a drop in the bucket for what I do now. I also think that you need to do some research of what companies are in your area, what FBOs, the small private terminals, which ones are in your area, so that when you do get done with training, you are familiar with those names and places and sort of have built a little bit of groundwork. And that's where you plant the seeds of networking. The networking is gonna, I'll get into it a little bit more, but that's what's gonna make or break you. And that's what's gonna be the difference. Also, attending info sessions like this. I was just talking to Natalie earlier, and we were saying that, when we were first starting, we would have killed for something like this. And they may have had this, but I wasn't privy to it. And I spent months online trying to, get into this and learn and kind of absorb all the information that I could. So what you're doing right now and being a part of this is huge. It's so, so important. Step 2 is attend your training. Take your training seriously. I beg you, take your training seriously. It is so important that you get that safety training. If anybody's familiar with what happened over the weekend, God, that was devastating. But that flight attendant made all the difference. That crew and that flight attendant are the reason why those guests survived. It is imperative that you know your safety equipment that you have on board, that you know how to use it, that you know where it's at, that you know how to get out of the windows, that you know that you have a plan. But I just want to make the point of it matters. Where you go to training matters. It's important to balance your priorities. What am I looking to get out of this outside of, that safety training? And what is going to be the most widely accepted training? Where am I going to be able to get a job when I'm done with this training? I don't have experience with facts, but I hear phenomenal experiences and reviews from people. I went to flight safety. I loved it. I just went to my recurrent a month ago down in Dallas. They are top notch. I cannot recommend them enough. Flight Safety and Facts have locations all over the country. So like I said, do your research, see where you're at. There might be one near you that you don't even realize. So take the time to do that. So once you go through your training and you are done, seek mentorship. Just do it. It's such an underrated piece to what we do. I have mentors. I had mentors when I first started, and I have mentors now, whether it's an individual or a group or a more structured program. It's a little bit of hand holding, and that's okay. That's totally okay. You need somebody who can give you advice, direction, and be a truthful soundboard. You need somebody who is going to shoot you straight in this industry. Because unfortunately, that's not always the case out of, wanting to spare feelings. But like I mentioned earlier, you got to have thick skin in this industry, and you need to be able to take some critique. If you have a mentor that you trust, that's the way to go about it. Cabins in the Sky, I do mentorship, and many of the ladies that I mentor are on this call, and they would probably tell you, I hope, that they really enjoyed their experience working with me, because I've loved every single second of it. I have a few different ways that you can do it. I have one-on-one sessions, and I also have a more robust monthly program. While you are seeking mentorship, you also need to network like it is your full-time job, because it is. And it is something that if you learn how to do it at the beginning and develop really good habits, props to you, because you're going to have to keep doing it. This right here in and of itself is a networking opportunity as well. And you need to know how to do it well. There is good networking and there is bad networking. Learn how to network well. And that looks a little bit different for everybody, but I think first and foremost, if you are coming from a genuine place of wanting to learn, wanting to be involved, and wanting to be a valued member of this community, you're going to be just fine networking. It's a combination of who you know, who knows you, and it also does matter what you know. Sometimes people say it doesn't matter what you know, but I politely disagree with that. You need to know your stuff. You need to be knowledgeable of what's going on in the industry and what you're walking into with these people, events, everything like that. There's events all over the country all of the time. They have local events. There are more regional events. We are doing a cabin attendant non-conference conference in April in Charlotte that I am so excited to be a part of. And that is an absolutely wonderful opportunity to really get involved in the cabin attendant community, learn from your peers, get to know people, so-and-so you've been chatting with on Instagram, meet them in person. It's absolutely fantastic. So if you're going, let me know. I'm excited to see you all there. And that sort of leads into step 5. You have to show up. Networking and sending your resume from behind a computer screen, that's all good and fine. But the difference is made when you're in person, when you are going to those FBOs, when you are going to those conferences, you are calling to set up coffee dates with somebody to pick their brain and learn a little bit about them and what they do. Like I said, that's how I got my foot in the door. I messaged someone on LinkedIn, asked if I could schedule a call or meet them in person. They picked up the phone and said, Lauren, I know exactly who you are. You have to do those things. It's very uncomfortable at first if you're not used to doing it. But I know there's someone on this call right now. She's doing it. She's taking this call from an FBO, and I'm so proud of her. She's doing the right things. So that is my spiel on how you get into private aviation. And again, it's going to be different for everybody, I think, based on where you're at and your skill set and your careers and location and things like that. But this is the general roadmap that I was talking about. All right. Do you need commercial experience? No, you do not. You don't. Having commercial experience is great, and I absolutely do not discredit it, but you don't have to have it. I certainly didn't. The training is very different. I have had people reach out to me and say, hey, I have this commercial training. Can I just use that training to go into private? You can't. It's different. The training, the job duties, skill sets, they're all different. There are some commercial cabin or flight attendants who work contract and do some flying in private on the side, but they still need to have that private training that I talked about, the FACS, the flight safety, or any of the specialties. The beautiful thing about what we do is that while you don't need commercial experience, there are so many different backgrounds of very, very successful people in this industry. I have friends who were teachers, who were executive assistants, florists, fitness instructors. They work in culinary, food and bev, hotels, nannies. I mean, this is just a very small list of the backgrounds that make a great cabin attendant. I have people who work in gyms. I have people who owned their own daycare centers. I mean, the list is endless. And I think at the end of the day, if you have a genuine heart to serve and to create that guest experience and to be that epitome of hospitality, you're going to be very, very successful in this industry. The next question, which I don't know if I actually like getting this question or not, because it's really, really difficult to answer. And I don't want to set any expectations or give anybody inaccurate information. So I've compiled some things that go into and are factors of what your pay and salary will look like. I also have a free guide on my website. It's on the homepage, halfway down the middle. Pop in your email address and this downloadable guide will be sent right to you. And it just takes all of the things that we talk about in the industry and it combines it into one downloadable file. So that's on there if you're interested after the call. So obviously, experience matters when it comes to pay and salary. And I'm not just talking about experience as a cabin attendant. It means, how much experience do you have in high-end service? Are you a trained chef? Do you have experience in yachting? Have you worked in very, very high-end food and beverage? Things like that come into play when you are talking about salary and pay expectations. Certifications. What training do you have? Do you have additional certifications outside of the normal, standard FACS, flight safety, and CPR? Have you gone to Da Vinci? Have you done their exceptional culinary school training and things like that? Because that matters. And that's worth, one, putting on your resume, but two, talking about that when the negotiation topic does or, ever comes up. Your base and location. So the cost of living in an area can matter when you are considering your salary or your day rate. A job that is in Lincoln, Nebraska is going to be very different than one that's in Miami. The cost of living, it is what it is, but they are different. So that is going to have an effect on what you make. If you are on a 91 account, where is it based? Are you required to live there, or is it a commutable job? Commutable as in the aircraft is based in one place and you airline in for work. Job duties. This is a very, very, very important factor when talking about pay and salary. Some of the things to consider: are you doing mostly domestic flying, or are you doing long range international trips? How many days are you flying a month? How many days are you on? How many days are you physically flying and working and gone away from home? And what are those expectations? Are you somebody who is the cabin attendant and then you leave and you are off? Or are you, in charge of all of the catering? Are you in charge of making travel arrangements? Are you a nanny? Are you their private chef as well? I mean, the list can go on and on and on, but you need to be very clear about what those expectations are, because again, that does play a huge role. Do you have hard days off? Some accounts don't. And when you have had a day off, they said, oh yeah, yesterday, that was a day off. That was a hard day off. I didn't work yesterday. But sometimes they have more specific, where they have, 8 days off a month, where they preset them and they don't work those days. And that matters when you're talking about salary. And are you the only cabin attendant who is on that account or working within that company? That makes a huge difference, because when you're the only one in charge of the entirety of what that operation is doing, from like a stocking standpoint, a laundry, a cabin cleaning setup, and everything like that, that has a lot of bearing on your pay expectations. And the aircraft you're flying on, long range aircraft, tend to pay higher just because of the capabilities of the airplane and the amount of work that goes into, longer flights. Smaller aircraft are great entry level options for new cabin attendants who might not have a lot of experience yet. And looking back on it, I think, I started on a Challenger 604, and that was an absolutely fantastic aircraft for me to start on. It was smaller than the one that I'm on right now, but I was able to really come into my own and learn how to take advantage of my galley and everything it had to offer, and the organization and everything like that. A smaller aircraft is a good stepping stone. But again, they don't always, sometimes they do, but they don't always pay the same way that the larger aircraft do. I've tried to split these up again between the different categories of companies or accounts that you could be working with. So a charter operator 135, like I said, everyone, I didn't want to put numbers on here, but I felt like I had to put something on here that I felt was true and accurate to really give you a feel for what is out there. My first job at a 135 started at $55,000 a year. And I think it's maybe middle of the road, in my opinion. A lot of times these companies will have health benefits. They'll have 401k. You'll have per diem, which is amount of money that you are given, for example, per day to use on food, bev, whatever, while you're there. The one nice thing about this too is that you also have the opportunity to work extra days on the front end of your rotation, and sometimes on the back end as well. There would be many times where I would come out a day early or stay a day later to make a day rate. You see that number and you think, that might be a little bit lower, but there's opportunities within that. And you'd be surprised that you don't even notice because you're flying so much and you love it. I tell people who are getting into this industry that my experience working in a 135 operator taught me more than I could have ever learned in any other job. I am so thankful for my time there. I could never do the job I'm doing now without it. It was imperative, and I loved every single second of it. When you get down to the fractional owner, so it's going to be a Part 91K. This is really tough to explain, and you can do a little bit more research, but the best way to describe it is like a NetJets or a FlexJet. They have very strong benefits, union negotiated benefit packages, stout in-house training, and in my opinion, it's similar to an airline position in the standardness of it and the way that their schedules work. Seniority based, and there's guaranteed pay scales. And then you also have the Part 91 private owner and operator. So you'll talk to people and there's this illusion, and maybe it's true, but this idea that a Part 91 account is sort of the end all be all, what everybody's working towards. And some people are, but I don't want people to think that that is the only way to make a good living or that's the end goal. Because I've talked to many people who have been doing this for quite a while and they love working their 135 job. They really do. They don't want to work on a 91 account because of some of the responsibility that comes with it, the extra job duties, the schedule, and things like that. My job extends far beyond the cabin. I have a lot of responsibility that I absolutely love and I'm happy to have, but somebody who is looking to have a little bit more structure to their schedule in life, what matters, what's important to you, how much is worth it. So that's my spiel on 91. I just didn't feel confident putting a number on there because the range of it is so vast because every single account's different. Then you also have an independent contractor. So like I mentioned before, they make a day rate. Rates for cabin attendants range from about $600 a day up to $1,200. The higher end is for cabin attendants who have a ton of experience and are doing some of those long range, they're doing across the world trips. They're doing extensive catering that they're providing on their own and the responsibilities are vast. So like I said, it's based on aircraft, trip type, time, and things like that. I will say that if you are looking to do contract work, important to have clear expectations before each trip. Expectations of pay. What days qualify to get paid? Are you paid for travel? What if the trip cancels? What does that time frame look like? Questions like that go into pay as well. So I just wanted to throw that in there. It's not as cut and dry. Just a couple ways to follow Cabins in the Sky. I'm on Instagram. I also have a business page on Facebook, and I also have a LinkedIn business page as well. It's fairly new. I'm excited about it. LinkedIn is a fantastic networking tool. I talk about this stuff all day, every day, like aviation. I mean, it really is my life, but it's a lot different getting in front of people. But I do appreciate your support and your interest. And, like I said, this career is what you make it. It has the ability to be the best thing that's ever happened to you, just like mine